You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and let's review what has been uncovered about the bizarre life of 26-year-old Jared Ravizza. And I want to be careful here. We're going to be talking about someone with mental illness, and I want to be respectful. But this 26-year-old Martha's Vineyard man who has made claims that he is a philanthropist, a professional skier, and an entrepreneur has been accused of stabbing 4 girls at a Braintree movie theater and then 2 workers at a McDonald's in Plymouth. And he is also being linked to a death in Connecticut. So let's start with his parents, who aren't speaking to the public at this time. But the Boston Globe has reported that Jason and Kimberly Ravizza of Agawam, Massachusetts, well, they both work in education. Jason is a licensed mental health counselor at Crosspoint Clinical Services in West Springfield, and he's also been a counselor at White Elementary School in Springfield. Jared's mother, Kimberly, is the director of nursing and health services at Veritas Preparatory Charter School in Springfield. Now, I did some digging on Jared's regular Instagram account. This account, which has absolutely 0 pictures with anyone, no friends, no family, just selfies. Well, the account has over 200,000 followers. Now, I'm suspect that those followers are organic because he doesn't really have interaction on the many selfies that he posts. I can't see how many likes he gets because he's got that turned off, but there aren't comments and it doesn't appear like there's a ton of traffic. So I'm kind of wondering if he bought his followers. But the selfie-laden account does have an art piece posted here and there, but mostly it's a shirtless and very fit Jared. He still has a handful of posts back from 2018 where he looks like a college frat boy. Cotton shorts, a button-down casual shirt. But by 2020, the posts take a dramatic turn. His hair is growing out and it's bleached golden blonde, almost white blonde. Working out seems to be his lifestyle, and shirtless outdoor pics seem to be his content. In mid-2023, his content takes a turn. He's now doing yoga in some pics. He's more feminine in some of the posts. It looks like he got lip fillers, and they look good, by the way. And he's seen being a, quote, artist. In an April 5th post, he is dancing in Martha's Vineyard with his gray poodle. And then in an April 10th post, he makes a card that says, Jared loves Jesus. By the end of April, he's now posting content that includes a music room. And most of these posts don't even have captions. On May 24th, that's his last post, he's in a butterfly baseball cap and he's just vacantly staring at the camera. So what can we glean from this? I think for me, Jared moves in and out of personality types and hobbies, and a deep dive by the Boston Globe backs that up. It seems Jared owns a marketing firm called Ravizza Jones. The website touts that Ravizza Jones is a leading global digital marketing and social media management agency, and that there's locations in New York, Connecticut, Florida, California, and Europe. The website also lists the 26-year-old as the founder and chief executive. Now, a bio for Jared on the website claims Jared leads a jet-setting lifestyle and has massive success in marketing, professional skiing, and the arts. Now, most of those claims can't be verified. He was not listed with any reputable skiing organizations, and his art seems to be an at-home hobby, and that's about it. Online databases in the various states that I listed do not show offices or company listings for Ravizza Jones. The Boston Globe did uncover a company filing with the Boston State Corporation Division, but that happened just this last January. However, the Martha's Vineyard Times did a profile on Jared back in December of 2021. And in that interview, Jared claimed he was a professional skier and was also doing extensive philanthropy by working through the Ravizza Global Initiative. Okay, so this is a new group. This made-up nonprofit was touted by Jared as a way to help people with disabilities and serious illnesses, helping them to experience skiing and surfing and other outdoor activities. Now, the Boston Globe searched the Massachusetts Public Charities database, and there was no company with Revisa in the name. They then searched the National Charity Database, and they only found a nonprofit named Revisa Family Foundation, based in Northern California. And apparently, that's not affiliated with Jared. There is no listing for Revisa with U.S. Ski and Snowboard. That's the major sanctioning body for professional skiers in the United States. And there's also no listing with the International Ski and Snowboard Federation. That's the governing body for alpine ski racing, cross-country ski racing, and other international skiing and snowboarding competitions. And I'll remind you, not a single picture on his Instagram that has over 200,000 followers has anything to do with skiing. Yet, an October 2021 profile from Thrive Global calls Jared a professional big mountain skier who is working to help save the planet and also to preserve the mountains and protect the environment. I think we can deduce that Jared is potentially suffering from delusions and possibly building up to a psychotic break, which may have led to the stabbing of 6 people and the killing of one of Jared's friends. I'm not really sure what to label Jared's friend as, but let's dive into the criminal activity, then you can decide. And we'll also start by taking a look at the timeline that led to Jared wrecking a beautiful Porsche and landing himself in jail without bail possibilities. All right, back in December 2023, a well-being check was performed on Jared. The officer wrote in the report that Jared was morphing into whatever topic of conversation was at hand. For example, he claims he's a professional skier, then a professional DJ, all of it depending on what is happening at the time. However, the report stated that Jared was not a threat to himself. Then in January of 2024, during a hot yoga class, police were called because Jared was acting suspicious. The report was filed by a woman in the class, and she told officers that she thought Jared was some sort of an influencer. No charges were filed after the officer investigated the claims. Then in April, Jared was arrested after he allegedly attacked his father, Jason. Now, this all happened in Martha's Vineyard, and Jason, in the police report, told authorities that his son was suffering a mental break. That police report notes that Jared was foaming at the mouth and that he was speaking nonsensical during the whole entire arrest. Now, the police requested that Jared be held in a Martha's Vineyard hospital on an involuntary hold, but after an evaluation, he was released. The hospital cited that Jared didn't meet the standards for the hold. Now, during the month of April, Jared also filed legal paperwork to have his name changed to Jared Love Jones. Now, this seems to be a nod to his grandma Jones, but I think it's just one more piece of the puzzle that shows Jared was always morphing and changing. Then, on Saturday, May 25th, Jared was in a home that he had been sharing with 70-year-old Bruce Feldman. Okay, remember, this is the guy I don't know what to call him, if he's his friend, not his friend. I don't know if it's a love interest. I have no idea what the connection is between these two. But here's the details, and they're still a little muddy, especially the part about which detail comes first and what comes second. But here's what locals are saying. They said Jared was renting the home solo for about a month, and then Bruce showed up. One neighbor told Fox Digital that Bruce had indicated to him that he was flat broke, and he was hoping Jared would let him stay for a while. Now, Jared was having a tiff or an argument with the owners of a nearby home, and apparently the homeowners had returned to their house to find Bruce sitting on the porch of the home, and Bruce was allowing a dog to run throughout the yard. The homeowners threatened to call the police, and that is when Bruce left. Jared then allegedly returned to the home to settle the dispute, but he didn't do it verbally. It seems Jared threw a shovel through the glass portion of the homeowner's front door. And Jared's very identifiable. That blonde hair was so unique that people even reported it as a blonde wig. And I need to pause the story right here. I've seen reports that it was Jared who was camping out on the porch and letting his dog run free. But it is Bruce who's been accused of this behavior by several neighbors. So when I say this part is muddy, I meant it. Whatever, whomever, someone was sitting on the porch, it started the fight. Jared allegedly throws the shovel through the glass of the front door, and then they call the police. Now, This part gets more clear. The owners of the home with the broken glass door, well, they tell police that Jared was the man staying at the home with Bruce Feldman. A disturbance had already been witnessed by neighbors at that home that Bruce and Jared were sharing, and that happened just a few hours earlier. When police went to Bruce and Jared's home, they found him dead from visible injuries outside of the home. Connecticut State Police at the time did not say if the wounds were from a stabbing with a knife, but what happens next in this story could have led us all to believe that is how Bruce died. Jared left the area after the alleged shovel throwing and the alleged murder of Bruce. And 3 hours later, authorities say Jared stabbed 4 girls at an AMC theater in Braintree. A 17-year-old and her friend, and also the 9-year-old twin sisters of the 17-year-old, were out for the evening together. The girls were seated watching the new John Krasinski film titled If. Jared approached the 4 girls from behind and began laughing as he stabbed each of them. Now, none of the girls sustained life-threatening injuries, and all are recovering physically. 1 hour later, authorities say Jared visited a McDonald's located at a Plymouth rest stop. Now, according to police reports filed in court, Jared entered the restaurant's drive-through lane in a black 2018 Porsche SUV, and he briefly got out of that Porsche to urinate. The Boston Globe said a woman witnessed the event. She said she kind of shrugged at him as if to say, "What do you think you're doing?" And police say Jared told the woman, "I gotta pee." He then, according to the report, got back into his car. He pulled forward a little bit, got back out, and then continued to urinate. And he gave the woman the middle finger. She said Jared had a big expression on his face with his eyes wide open. She said the look reminded her of Jack Nicholson's character in the film The Shining. When he finally reached the window in his Porsche SUV, Jared allegedly got into an argument about his order, which was 2 cheeseburgers, a small fry, and a McFlurry. Jared demanded the 28-year-old employee working the drive-through window check to make sure the order was correct. The employee told police that when he and Jared scuffled over the bag, Jared stabbed him in the forearm with a knife that was about 8 inches long. The employee also said the knife appeared to be old. Now, remember, Jared's in his car, and this worker is in the building, so there's a buffer between the two. After stumbling backwards from the knife attack, the worker jumped up and ran to his manager's office, where they both began treating the wound. I'm sure they thought Jared just drove away. But he didn't, because while they were bandaging his arm, they heard a woman scream in the restaurant. Now, the report says Jared had, in fact, driven away, but he returned to McDonald's, parked, and entered the restaurant with the knife in his hand. A woman saw his intent and yelled, "Stop! Don't do this!" Jared then lunged at the 21-year-old working her very first shift at that restaurant. Jared stabbed that poor woman more than once. She suffered wounds on her inner left bicep and her inner left underarm. And this totally makes sense since she probably put up her arms to protect her head and face. Now, another employee began yelling at Jared and chased him back out to his Porsche. Right before getting in his car, Jared allegedly turned around, smiled at the employee, and gave the okay hand gesture before fleeing in his car. Now, that employee memorized the license plate number and supplied it to the police. Both employees were treated at the hospital and released. As the police chased down Jared near Sandwich, Massachusetts, he would not pull over and a pursuit began. That pursuit led to Jared crashing that car and being arrested. The Porsche did erupt into flames before it was extinguished by first responders. Jared spent the evening in the hospital and was then released to authorities the next day. On Tuesday, Jared was arraigned for the 6 stabbing charges, but Connecticut has yet to charge Jared with Bruce's death. Now, the Plymouth office of the district attorney said a court clinician recommended Jared to be further evaluated over the next 20 days at Bridgewater State Hospital. So Jared is being held without bail, and his next scheduled appearance in court will be on June 17th. Bruce Feldman's ex-wife, Julie Feldman, told the New York Post that the whole event was just shocking. She said, through tears, that the two were together for a very long time, and this turn was all so unexpected. Locals in the area said Jared and Bruce had only been staying together for about 3 weeks. And locals in the area also said that Jared's gray poodle was killed during the attack against Bruce, but that has not been confirmed by authorities. Locals also told the Post that Bruce had described Jared as his friend to some people, and then to others, he had told them Jared was his son. Now, other reports say Bruce was a unique fellow as well. It seems he invented a device called the Ultimate Leaf Lifter. That device is a rake that looks like extra large salad tongs. You use the rake to pick up leaves and place them in a bag. Now, the device is meant to help those who can't bend over easily. Now, the medical examiner did release a report saying that Bruce died from stab wounds to his head and chest area. Bruce's obituary has yet to be released when I went to record this episode, so I don't know if he has any children or really what his jobs were. I just know what I've told you. And the names of the stabbing victims, they've not been released either. But the mother of 3 of the 4 girls stabbed at the AMC movie theater said that the girls will recover physically, but the emotional and mental trauma will always remain. And now, an unexpected update to the disappearance of a 6-year-old boy back in May of 2011. Timothy Pitzen was the son and only child of James Pitzen and Amy Fry Pitzen. It was May 11th of 2011, and Timothy was just about to complete his kindergarten year of schooling in Aurora, Illinois. Timothy's father dropped him off at Greenman Elementary School. As he exited the car, James said, "See you later, buddy." And Timothy responded with, "Love you, Dad," just a few short minutes after he was left at school. Timothy's mother arrived at that same school and checked Timothy out of class for a supposed family emergency that didn't exist. Timothy and Amy aren't accounted for until 10 a.m., so about an hour and a half is missing. But at 10, they drop Amy's car off at a repair shop. An employee of the repair shop gives the mother and son a ride to the Brookfield Zoo, and it seems they stayed there and then returned to the repair shop at 3 that afternoon in order to pick up Amy's car. From there, Amy drove the two about an hour north to Key Lime Resort in Gurnee, Illinois. This had to be such a fun yet exhausting day for Timothy. First the zoo, and now a water park with indoor slides. The next morning, the two hit the road again. And just as the day before, they continue to head north, nearly 3 hours this time, when Amy drives Timothy from Gurnee to Kalahari Resort in Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin. Now, Kalahari is another water park with hotel rooms and a spa area and some shopping and restaurant areas. And while there, they were spotted on security camera footage while waiting in line. And that's the last known sighting of Timothy Pitzen. A couple of hours after the surveillance footage sighting, at noon that day, Amy gets in contact with multiple family members. She is using a cell phone because it's 2011, and the data coverage recovery of information shows that she was near Route 40 and Sterling, Illinois. But this means she obviously got right back in her car after the video surveillance footage, and she drove south for nearly 3 hours. So we went north, then she went south, and she made the phone calls. And during those phone calls, she speaks with her mother and her brother-in-law, but she does not call her husband, who has obviously been looking for them. He had been searching for them since he arrived at the school to pick Timothy up. Now that happened on the 11th, and it's now the 13th. During those phone calls, Timothy was heard in the background, and at one point during the calls, he says loudly enough for the other person to hear that he was hungry. Amy reassures everyone that Timothy is safe. Now, James had been trying to call Amy repeatedly, obviously, and he's also trying to decide if she had planned this trip or if it was just spontaneous. The two were enduring some turbulent times in their marriage, and James had told those close to him that he intended to divorce Amy and try to get sole custody of Timothy. Well, later that night at 7:25, Amy is spotted on security cameras alone at a Family Dollar store in Winnebago, Illinois. All right, remember earlier in the day, Amy had traveled south and was calling from somewhere near Sterling, Illinois, but now she's a little over an hour north again. While at the Family Dollar store, she purchases a pen some notepaper, and some envelopes. And then a half hour later, she's spotted again, alone, at Sullivan's food store. During the next 3 hours, Amy is not spotted, but she does end up east of Winnebago in Rockford, Illinois. So at 11:15 p.m., she checks into a hotel there. And sometime during that night, she takes her own life by slashing her wrists and her neck and overdosing on antihistamines. She was found by the motel cleaning staff the next day. Next to her body was a note that actually apologized for the mess she had created. The note also claimed that Timothy was safe and would never be found because he was with people that would take care of him. As the police began investigating, they immediately tested the knife that Amy had used in her suicide, but the knife only contained her blood. However, in the car that investigators found parked in the grass near a creek, there was a dried pool of Timothy's blood. But that lead was squashed by family members who said just a couple of weeks prior, Timothy had gotten a nosebleed in the car and that small stain was most likely from that nosebleed. Now, one thing investigators could not find was Amy's cell phone, and the police, they just hit a dead end. They attempted testing the soil and weeds that were stuck in the undercarriage of Amy's blue Ford Expedition, trying to help determine where she had been. And that didn't really develop any leads either. And none of Timothy's possessions were found in the motel room, not his Spider-Man backpack or any of his clothes. Well, 2 years after the disappearance, Amy's cell phone was found alongside the road on Illinois Route 78. This is north of Mount Carroll, Illinois. But as all the other leads in the case, it didn't hold any new information really. But let's talk about the distance though. Mount Carroll is west of Rockford and also west of Winnebago. Those were the last two places that Amy was spotted. So it's about an hour west of Rockford. So she would have had the time to travel to somewhere near Mount Carroll from Winnebago, and then to turn around and head to Rockford, where she checked into that motel late that evening. Investigators had tracked Amy's iPass account in the months prior to Amy's death and Timothy's disappearance, and they found that Amy had made 2 prior trips to Sterling, once in February and one time in March. Those were just months before Timothy disappeared. Her family had no idea she had taken those trips. Investigators believed she was scouting discreet locations to hand Timothy off to a new, quote, adoptive family, or to even find a secluded area to bury a body. Well, 8 years after his disappearance, reports of a teenager wandering the streets of Newport, Kentucky, briefly elevated the hopes of the Pitzen family. When police tracked the wandering teenager down, he told the authorities that he was Timothy Pitzen. But it took just 24 hours, and the FBI announced on Twitter that the teenager was not Timothy. The teenager wasn't even a teenager. He was a 23-year-old mentally unstable man who had been released from prison just 1 month earlier. And in case you're asking, he did serve 2 more years in prison for perpetrating the hoax about being Timothy. And now we're to 2024. And Timothy's maternal grandmother, Linda Pitzen, well, she's developed her own theory about Timothy's disappearance. She believes that her grandson has been taken in by a Mormon commune. She told the U.S. Sun that Amy wanted Timothy to be raised Mormon. She said the rest of the family doesn't belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or, as she is referring to them, the Mormons. And she also said that Amy knew she was going to complete suicide, so she believes she wanted her son raised by those who shared her beliefs. Now, Amy herself was a convert to the religion. She hadn't been raised in the church. And Linda did clarify that Amy never pressured any of her family or James's family to attend the congregation. But that congregation had become very important to her. Linda said she has tortured herself over the last 13 years, reading and rereading the notes that Amy left. She told the U.S. Sun that the words in the note have led her to her conclusion that Timothy is alive and has been brainwashed to believe his past was not one that included Amy and James, or her for that matter. Now, the Mormon Church does have a deep historical root to Illinois. The church settled an area known as Nauvoo on the banks of the Mississippi River. And over about a decade, from the 1830s to the 1840s, they grew a city with a population of around 12,000 people. Now, eventually the Mormons left the area and traveled west, and the city of Nauvoo laid in ruins for years before efforts by the LDS Church and the RLDS Church revitalized the city into a thriving tourist location. Now, I truly hope on this 13th anniversary of Timothy's disappearance that the increased and reignited coverage of his disappearance will result in some answers for the Pitzen family. And finally today, a whole lot has happened in the Chad Daybell case since the last Rise in Crime episode. Chad Daybell was found guilty of all charges in his capital murder case. Guilt was determined in the deaths of his stepchildren, J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan, and the death of his wife, Tammy Daybell. Now, I've given so many background details on this case that I'm not going to go back over it here. But I did promise that I would explain the death penalty phase of this case in Idaho. After speaking with two defense attorneys on Thursday, which was the day that the guilty verdict came down, they helped me understand how the sentencing portion would go forward. In Idaho, every jury trial has two portions, the trial phase and the sentencing phase, except only in capital murder cases, the jury handles the sentencing portion. So if you remember, Judge Boyce handled Lori Vallow's sentencing portion, and he found about a month after her trial and her guilty verdict that she would serve life in prison. But in a capital murder case, the jury moves immediately into the sentencing phase following the guilty verdict. Now, during this phase, the prosecution can present witnesses and testimony that highlight the depravity of the murders, which is exactly what the state did. JJ's grandmother, Kay Woodcock, was one of the witnesses. She told the jurors that she never got enough of JJ and that Chad made sure she never would, that all she has left is memories of JJ. She also reminded the jurors that JJ would have just celebrated his 12th birthday a few days prior if he had not been murdered by Chad. And Colby Ryan, that's Tylee's older brother and Lori Vallow's son, well, he told the jurors that he had lost his entire family, that the murders were like a nuclear bomb had been dropped on his family. He said the following: Tylee will never be able to travel like she always wanted to, or to have a family of her own, or even find herself in this world. JJ will never be able to spread his love or his light around the world the way he used to. And then Samantha Gwillem, okay, that's Tammy's sister. Well, she told the jurors that she knew from the moment that she heard Tammy had died that something just wasn't right. She told jurors that Tammy was a force for good and that she loved being a mother and a grandmother. She also said Tammy's absence in this world has left a void that can't be filled. Now, when I interviewed the two defense attorneys, they explained that Chad's attorney, John Pryor, could also offer testimony called mitigating circumstances. So this would be things in Chad's life that would have compelled him to commit murder, like being a religious zealot or being mentally compromised. In other cases, not in Chad's, but in other cases, a defense might offer up like years of abuse as a mitigating circumstance for avoiding the death penalty. In a strange twist of events, John Pryor chose to offer no mitigating circumstances. Chad waived his right. This also meant we would not be hearing from Chad. See, he could have presented his own mitigating circumstances, but he didn't. Now, I asked the defense attorneys if it would ever be wise for a client to choose the death penalty over life in prison. And hear me out. If sentenced to the death penalty in Idaho, you receive an automatic appeal, one that is reviewed in a more neutral stance to see if the trial, the charges, the jurors, if any of it was not in cohesion with the statutes of Idaho. But the two attorneys said it would be unlikely for any attorney to choose for his client to receive the death penalty. But Chad didn't even try to fight it. And maybe he told his attorney not to. We'll have to see if that comes out. Now, the jurors received the sentencing portion of the case on Friday afternoon, and they deliberated until 8 p.m. that evening. They resumed deliberations on Saturday morning, and at 11:45, they reconvened the court. The jurors found that Chad should receive the death penalty for all the charges of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Now, if you listen to the court clerk reading the findings, it was kind of a bit confusing in the wording, But Judge Boyce cleared that all up immediately, saying in layman's terms, Chad will be sentenced to the death penalty. Now, Judge Boyce will determine the sentencing for the grand theft and insurance fraud. Chad cashed in on Tammy's insurance policy, and he also spent money that was provided by the government to Lori's children. See, Lori continued to get Social Security payments for Tylee and JJ after their deaths. In Idaho, the death penalty can be administered by lethal injection or the firing squad. However, it will be years before Chad will face that reality. Now, I've also had multiple people say that Chad will be safer in the prison system on death row than he would be in general population. I'm not a prison expert. I'm just sharing thoughts that people, and maybe many of you, might be thinking. Lori Vallow is in Arizona facing conspiracy to commit first-degree murder for the death of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. All right, that's your Monday episode of Rise in Crime. Please leave a 5-star review and rating and a comment, and like and follow on all of our social media and YouTube accounts that we have here at Ono Media. You can join me again on Thursday for the updates to the TikTok murderer being found guilty, and also for an update to Karen Reed's trial, and also more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.